And it looks like we are live. All right, guys, you know what we got to do. Get the Facebook groups in here on a wonderful Friday evening. Get everybody in here with the Mile High Huddle community. It's always good to go deep and do the great Dove Valley Deep Diver Show. Mile High, hello everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host Lance Sanderson, and joining me as per usual is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. And before I get into it, do you got a fox? Is that a coyote, a wolf, or a fox? Like, what is that hanging off your microphone?
It's a wolf.
It's a wolf. Okay, a gray wolf. There you go. That's what's up.
So for over the weekend, we took my daughter up to Anchorage for her birthday. We did a bunch of stuff, did mini golfing, went to the museum, went to the zoo, and I ended up getting a little wolf hugger thing. To keep me company when I'm in here and having to work, I guess.
It's staring directly into my soul right now. For those of you guys listening after the fact, that like this wolf, it's adorable, by the way, but it is staring directly into me right now.
Yeah. So, how was your 4th of July? Did you have a good day yesterday?
It was a lot of fun, honestly. We did a barbecue with my in-laws as we do every single year. Shot a lot of fireworks towards the end of the day. It was good. Probably had too many adult beverages, but it is what it is. I woke up today as my last day currently with my current employer, but more news to come on that. We'll get into that at another time. No big deal. But no, it was a lot of fun, man. How'd you guys fare over yesterday afternoon?
Yeah, it was a good day. We walk away with all 10 fingers and toes, so no bodily damage. But it was nice. We don't do a whole lot for it. We went down to the local parade, then we came back to our place with my parents. Just hung out, played some games, and stuff like that, and just had a nice, enjoyable day as a family.
So let me get back to it. How are you? How are you feeling today?
Well, surprise, surprise, I'm really tired.
I told you. I'm going to call you out, man. Every single time we go on the show, you're always tired. Let's go.
No, I suffer from insomnia, so I don't get a lot of sleep as it is. And then,
yeah, I know.
Last week I talked about, exercising and working out and dieting and all that. And well, I went pretty hard at it today with the workouts. So my shoulders are a little sore and I'm a little tired from that. But, I'm amped up. I'm ready to go. I got the blood flowing. I'm excited to talk about Broncos football, especially the 2023 draft class. Yeah. It's like over the past couple months, everything's just kind of like pushed the 2023 draft class down a little bit. Understandable with the new quarterback in town and how the 2024 draft went. But, it's nice to look back at this and see what do we need from these guys this next season and their sophomore season.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, quite honestly, this roster has been like there's such a dearth of talent. I don't want to say that there's no talent on this roster because I do think that there's a lot of potential here. We talked about it last week. Like Baron Browning, you've got Marvin Mims. We're going to talk about him here in just a few minutes. You've got Drew Sanders, obviously injured reserve. Again, Riley Moss. You've got Chris Abrams. Like there's some quality draft picks, but this roster overall is really lacking talent top to bottom, man. And you got to focus on these draft classes. And obviously you miss out on a couple of first round picks when trading for Russell Wilson, a couple second round picks in that trade as well. You move on from a first round pick, a second round pick to move to get Sean Payton in the fold, trading another pick to get Riley Moss into here. You're really relying on this 2023 draft class right now to take a big step forward. And we're going to break it down, everything that we need, that we at least want to see from the 2023 draft class in today's episode of DVDD. Before we get into that, I want to say hello to everybody joining us. A little slow right now, but that's fine. We got Todd Ostendorf, Kevin Gray in the house, Michael Ronquillo jumping in as he's always want to do here on a great Friday evening. And for every single show, whether it's in the morning, Sunday through Saturday, does not matter. The Ronk is the king here in terms of support. Good evening, Lance and Erick on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos, go Michael, go everybody for joining us. Thank you all for being here on a great Friday evening. Like Erick said, we're going to break down this 2023 NFL draft class. And I think that obviously you got to start with the one big, I think, game-changing player that the Broncos have on this roster from 2023, Marvin Mims, dude. Like, last year was the only wide receiver on this Broncos team that eclipsed 100 yards. And Sean Payton told everybody that Mims didn't see a lot of snaps last year because Jerry Jeudy played pretty much the same role in the offense. So obviously those snap counts for him are going to increase with Jeudy out of the way, being traded to the Cleveland Browns. What exactly, Eric, do you see his role being this season, given the quarterback situation as it stands right now?
Well, he's going to be the starter in the slot. The question is it going to be the number 2 guy in the passing in terms of reads, or is it going to be the number 3? A lot of that depends on, well, what do they do with Cortland Sutton? How does Tim Patrick do? And even Josh Reynolds, who they signed to be that number 2 guy, even though he's been a number 3 guy for most of his career. But basically with Marvin Mims is he's going to be they're going to try to make him be that explosive threat, working both underneath and intermediate and those deep routes, working every level of the field. But he's got to show a lot of growth for it. I mean, yeah, he was a Pro Bowler as a rookie, but it was because of what he did on special teams. His play on offense left a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
A lot of what you saw in college, we didn't see it translate as a rookie. And that's concerning because receivers now it used to be like, oh, receivers took a year or two before they really got around. But we're starting to see over the last 5-6 years, receivers really starting to come out hot. And we didn't see that from Mims. So we got to see that improvement. We got to see the improvement with the route running, the hands, and just the consistency with it. One of the biggest things for me, though, isn't beside, even over all of that, is his speed variance. He was such a one-tempo route runner last year that it was pretty easy to stick with him. If you can vary that speed and catch, corners sleeping a little bit and then use, hit that extra gear to burst by them, that can help him out, create some of those big plays. Or even, on the end of rounds that they use, instead of being one tempo throughout all that, slow down a little bit, then, gear up and get going. But they need something out of him because they traded up to get him in what was a pretty good receiver class.
Yeah.
They got to get their worth out of him in 1 year, not saying he's a bust or anything like that, but they want to flip the direction he's trending because right now he's trending down. They need him to start trending up.
I think the big thing here, and you kind of touched on it, the speed variation in his route running. You saw a lot of that at Oklahoma where he knew that he was just faster than everyone and he could just pretty much outrun any coverage. And while he ran, I don't want to say high quality routes, he was at least a good route runner at Oklahoma. The NFL level is a completely different game. You got to understand release packages, understand press coverage, understand zone coverage, how to flow into open spots, sit yourself down, and just make yourself an available receiver. And that was something that we didn't see from him last year a lot because, quite honestly, again, you have Jerry Jeudy playing kind of that similar role, starting in the slot, really working as a quality route runner over the middle of the field. With Mims, I think the big thing here that you really need to focus on is just accentuating that route running ability and trying to get more creative with his usage because, like you said, you got the special teams role. He has that vision. He has the ability to take plays deep down the field if you need it. Again, that 100-yard receiving game that he had against the Washington Commanders, they targeted him deep down the field, just running and blowing by coverage. How do you accentuate that not only vertically, but horizontally within this offense?
By getting a quarterback that'll actually do it. I said this a lot last season. One of the issues with how they used Marvin Mims was because of the quarterback. Because of the way Russell Wilson was with, his struggles on the short and intermediate routes and always looking to extend plays and looking for that deep shot. And that just kind of pigeonholed Marvin Mims into being that guy because they didn't really have anybody else to fill that role either. So, not just the quarterback, but the overall, utility of the receivers that they had just kind of led to this more limited role. And Jerry Jeudy was able to do a little bit more and kind of filled that role as Sean Payton talked about. So not having Jerry Jeudy, having more of an opening and having a quarterback that, isn't going to always look to, isn't going to look to extend plays and just drive the ball deep. He wants to work those intermediate, those shorter routes. That right there, that alone could really help open up the usage for Marvin Mims and allows Sean Payton to be a little bit more creative with his usage.
Well, and I think that, and this is going to go into my next question here for you. I think that having another player like that, obviously you have Jalen Virgil, who was a training camp darling a couple of years ago, but the Broncos went out and they traded up this year to go and get a guy like Troy Franklin. And you and I were talking a little bit privately behind the scenes here, but you mentioned something big here. Everyone's kind of overestimating his role within this offense. I still think that there's something that the Broncos can do, specifically Sean Payton, utilizing. You've got Troy Franklin, who has got elite deep level speed. You've got Marvin Mims, kind of similar skill set here in terms of what they bring to the fold. Can you utilize those guys together? And how does Troy Franklin impact the usage that Marvin Mims is going to have on this offense?
Yeah, I mean, you can utilize them both the same way. I mean, what Troy Franklin does best, and one of the things that he did the most, or very frequently at Oregon, was those 9 routes, the post, the corner.
Yep.
He did that extremely well, and he has that long speed, and he can vary his speed when attacking that to get corners in his hip and then blow by them, create that opening through his breaks. But he also can work, on those curls. He does that kind of well. And slants. That's another underrated element to Troy Franklin's game, is he can work on slants a little bit. The issue is he's going to be limited with his snap count because he doesn't offer much as a blocker in any element. So that's going to take away from it. But you can sit there and you can line up Troy Franklin on the boundary, Marvin Mims inside in the slot next to him, and then you can run, routes off of each other where Troy Franklin's running a post route, and then Marvin Mims is going to run a deep curl, or Troy Franklin's going to run a inside slant, and then Marvin Mims is just going to run a go route. You can work off that to create that opening based off of speed. It's why speed is so coveted by NFL teams anymore, because there are always ways you can make it work, even if you have multiple speedsters. And they're not, I mean, they have the speed is similar to them, but they have differences with their route running and, the difference with their size that can lead to that versatile usage for both of them to where they can work together out on the field.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that I want to see here, and hopefully the guy stays healthy, because you bring up a really good point here with Troy Franklin, with Marvin Mims. What is Greg Dulcich like combining those three together? How creative you can get with that kind of added speed, size, catch radius, versatility, line him up as a slot receiver, line him up on the outside. Like, you can get really creative. There's a lot of tools here. There's a lot of potential with this offense in terms of creating explosive plays. That's a big kind of sticking point for me. It's something I'm really curious to see how this Broncos offense looks like moving forward. We got Riptide jumping in here with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Riptide, for joining us. We definitely appreciate you. Alex Forsyth has to step up for the run game. We're going to go in order here with the draft class, but we've got this question here, and it brings me into the Alex Forsyth conversation. Obviously, starting center right now, we can argue and split hairs all we want to, but really the only quote-unquote open competition for a starting job on the offense right now is the center position, because we just don't have that guy. Obviously, Lloyd Cushenberry took off in free agency, went and got paid. You've got Forsyth, you've got Luke Wattenberg. You bring in Sam Mustipher at the as a veteran, kind of a guy to step in and just be a guiding force, more or less. Forsyth didn't see a lot of time last year, but he was tabbed as a starting center by Sean Payton after the 2023 NFL draft, where they took him, I believe, in the 6th round. How do you see this center battle shaping up right now? And with Forsyth, what does he bring as a run blocker specifically? Because I think this team's going to lean on the run game heavily this year.
Yeah, he's a quality run blocker. He can help there, but first things first is he's got to go win the starting job.
Yep.
Like, we don't know who the starting center is going to be. Is it going to be Alex Forsyth? And the thing is this is about who needs to step up. Alex Forsyth needs to step up and win that starting job.
Yeah, absolutely.
To really, get some added value out of this 2023 draft that you had, where you traded up not once but twice, sending a future third and all that, and that helps. That changes the value of things. Late pick guy who a lot of people felt would have gone earlier. Some people had him as a 3rd round, some as a 4th, and he fell because he wasn't able to do much during the draft process due to injury. Well, here's a good chance for you to get some really good value out of him by him winning the starting job and doing well. I mean, a lot of people are, earmarking him as a starter already because he has that 1 year of experience with Bo Nix, which that plays into it. That could help him win the starting job. But it all starts with got to win the starting job. And if he doesn't win the starting job, then it's going to be a little bit disappointment. But, you also got to look at some history here. Ben Paradis, how long did it take him to really come out as a starter? It was year 2, year 3 before he started.
Yep.
And then, Connor McGovern, he sat for a couple years and took over. But, at the time, that was okay because the Broncos, they had somebody who could step in and be the starter for them. They had a high quality or decent enough quarterback. They were in a better spot with the roster than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now they need that draft pick to hit. And the same can be said with Luke Wattenberg. They went and got him, and they need him to hit, whether that is as a guard where he has looked better at than center, or stepping up and really improving and becoming a starting center. They need one of these guys to step up and do it, because if you're turning to Sam Mustipher, then that is not a good sign for either of these draft picks. And
Right,
it's not
exactly.
a good sign because Sam Mustipher has been one of the worst starting centers in the NFL in the years that he was starting.
Yeah, I'm going to grab this really fast, Scott. We got Riptide jumping back in here. Matt Paradis didn't play in 2014 and then started in 2015. I believe you also have this is not a Broncos player, but Washington Commanders drafted my guy Chase Roulier in the 6th round out of Wyoming, sat for a year, and then started and became a high quality player. Injuries derailed that career, but he was well on his way to becoming one of the better centers in the NFL at the time. So my point here is saying that even though you're drafting a guy to play the center position in the 6th round, you're not just throwing this guy to the wayside. There are examples within the last 10 years of players that have been drafted at the center position in the 6th round who become quality starters. And I think that Forsyth, like you said, quality run blocker, was really good in pass protection, a high football IQ kind of guy, handles twists and stunts really well. But I think you nailed the point down directly here. The injury concerns. He had shoulder injury concerns, and I believe a hip concern, if I remember correctly, coming into that draft class that year. So if he can work through those injuries, like you said, you take that year off this last year, he needs to be the guy stepping forward and winning the starting center position, because one, it's not unprecedented for a player in the 6th round to win that job. But two, the Broncos, quite honestly, I don't believe have a better option. Sam Mustipher has been one of the worst starting centers in the NFL for the last 2 seasons, at least, going back to his time with the Chicago Bears. And Luke Wattenberg, a little bit undersized for an offensive lineman, lacks some length. But again, you said he looked better at guard. I agree with you 100% on that. Forsyth literally needs to be in the running, if not win this starting job for this offensive line, to kind of continue that cohesion, the camaraderie that they had from last season with everybody outside of Mike McGlinchey playing 1,000 snaps. You lose 1,000 snaps from the center position, you've got to replace that with a quality player. And I think Forsyth brings that to the fold. Let's go back to the chat really fast. We got Desert Creature jumping in here with a $20 super chat off the top rope. Thank you for joining us. New name for me. I don't remember your name here, but thank you for joining us. We definitely appreciate your support. For the Sleepy Bear on Erick's mic boom, appreciate the insight and information presented by the Dove Valley Deep Divers. We appreciate you, and thank you for joining us, man. It's always great to talk Denver Broncos football, and for everybody here, we appreciate you guys for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw somebody, I think it was Todd, made a comment about Connor Williams. The issue with Connor Williams is he's still recovering from a serious knee injury that a lot of people believe will see him sit out the majority, if not all, of this year. Yeah. That is the reason why he's still a free agent. That is why he's not really getting looked at. And that is a big concern there. I did do an article that hopefully will get published sometime within the next week that actually talks about some options, because in my honest opinion, I think that with this competition going on with Alex Forsyth, Luke Wattenberg, and even Sam Mustipher, they need to add another center. They need to add another veteran with good experience or quality experience instead of Sam Mustipher. And there are still some options out there, and I talk about those guys a little bit. And one of them is I have injury concerns with him, but he doesn't have the ones that it's not to the point where they're concerned that he's going to miss the season. But a familiar name in Connor McGovern. I mentioned him already, but he's another guy that they could look at. Yeah. And then I don't know if we flashed this, but Erick Flynn came in and threw some stars our way. We appreciate that, Erick, a lot. We appreciate all of you guys who come in and support the show through stars or super chats or even sharing and liking and all that jazz.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Your guys' support is tremendous. We couldn't do what we do without your guys' support. So we definitely love and appreciate every single one of you guys. But Erick Flynn, learn how to spell your name. There's a C in Erick. There's a C in Erick, okay? No, for real, though. Let's jump back into the chat. We got Phil McLaughlin jumping in. Scott pulled this up. I want to just kind of finish the conversation on Forsyth before we get to this. But Phil, great super chat. Well, I guess stars donator, big supporter here. Phil jumps in and says, "Good evening, Lance and Eric and Deacon Scott. Hope you had a great and safe 4th of July. It was awesome. Thank you for that. It's been so long that I've forgotten, but what grade did you give the 2023 NFL draft class for the Denver Broncos? I believe I gave it a B minus. It's been a minute. I'd have to. B minus, I think is where
I think
was
mine
at.
was in a C plus, and a lot of it dealt with giving up that future third to move up for Riley Moss.
Yep.
I can't remember for sure off the top of my head though.
So I think with me, it was getting Marvin Mims, who was that kind of explosive, dynamic receiver that the Broncos didn't have after KJ Hamler and his injury concerns. Like, you needed a guy that could really take the top off of the team or off the defense. With Riley Moss, I didn't like trading up to go and get him. I thought you had better options there as well at cornerback. And then I really liked the value of JL Skinner because I had a 3rd round grade on that player. But the torn pectoral, and this is a great way to segue into that, the torn pectoral muscle with him in the pre-draft process really kind of hampered his development going into the season. It was kind of like a lot like Riley Moss last year. You had that wasted season because of the injuries, but Skinner brings a lot of value as a box safety, and he excels at like seeing the ball carrier, chasing them down, quality tackler, plays with a lot of length, good size. Eric, how valuable does he become for the special teams units right now, given the changes to the kickoff rules? Because I think that you need players like this who are quality see ball, chase ball, lengthy players that bring good physicality and tackling skills.
Who are we talking about?
JL Skinner, dude. Come on, man.
JL
Pay
Skinner.
attention.
Sorry. No, it's like I heard you mention JL Skinner, then I thought you said another name, and that's my bad. JL Skinner, I think his key to making the roster this year is going to be through stepping up on special teams with the rule changes.
Yep.
And then going from there, seeing what he can do on defense. You know, he basically was redshirted last year. I think he only ended up playing like 2 snaps on defense near the end of the season.
Not a lot.
So yeah, I mean, he's a bigger guy. He's more of a linebacker than a safety with his size and the way he's built. So yeah, I think special teams is going to be big for him and to get him a spot on the roster and even end up having a role on the team this year. I mean, he may still make the roster, but his role may be questionable. So special teams is definitely the key focal point for him.
I agree with you 100%. I got a follow-up question. And I know you kind of just went on like a big reason why, but there's always something crazy that happens in training camp. You got injuries, anything's possible. Injury concerns, somebody gets traded, whatever that may be. That said, is there a way that Skinner can carve out a role on defense this season? And how does he make that happen given his skill set and what he brings to the fold? Because again, length, athleticism, good size, he brings that physicality. Is there like a box safety role that he can fill in? Say we got Caden Stearns, PJ Locke, you've got Brandon Jones. That 4th safety spot is kind of a hit or miss right now, given what we know of this roster. Is Skinner potentially going to be able to step in and fill a role on the defense this side of the season?
Yeah, he definitely could. I mean, there could be a role for him, you know, as a chess piece, so to speak, on the defense.
Yep.
With his size, you know, if he can show that he can handle tight ends in coverage, you know, where the Broncos were the 2nd worst team handling tight ends in coverage last year. That can be a big way because they haven't done anything to address that aspect of it. Everybody wants to point blame on Josie Jewell, but the biggest contributor to the issue about it was Alex Singleton. I mean, Alex Singleton was like over 30% of, you know, the reason for yards and catches allowed to tight ends or something like that. Yep. I can't remember exactly. I just got done writing an article about it that I think got published today.
It did.
So if JL Skinner can sit there and, you know, provide some answers to that, then yeah, he can carve out a role as a utility safety, as that 4th guy on there in certain downs, certain situations that he can, you know, sub in onto the field and, you know, hopefully provide an answer for Broncos and the Broncos defense in a specific area.
I think the big thing here is I want to see him utilized as a blitzer. If you can get him on the field, utilizing that first step explosiveness that he has, because this dude is a twitched up athlete with size, and the length is a big thing here. If he can, like, I think that's a big niche for him to carve out. If you want to run dime packages with him as a linebacker on the field, you can really utilize that kind of length and speed and athleticism as a blitzer and shooting gaps as a tackler, because he brings that to the fold every time he steps on the football field. I think a big part of his development here is, one, staying healthy. That hurt him last year for sure. The torn pec, got to do surgery. You got to get yourself back healthy. But when you get back on the field, show the IQ, show the ability to understand what you're supposed to be doing within the defensive front. And that for him was an issue at Boise State because he never really had that kind of defined role. He never had the deep safety role. He never really had that true defined box safety role. He kind of bounced around that Boise State defense, and he was just a playmaker. I think you can work with that. And I'm going to go to a player that I liked a lot for a long time, Sua Cravens, where you don't have a really true defined role for a player like him. I think JL Skinner can kind of be that player for this Broncos defense. He just has to show the capability, one, staying healthy, and two, understanding what he's supposed to be doing and playing within that specific role. And that's a big, big question mark for him.
Yeah, Sua Cravens was vastly overrated. And if you're wanting that out of JL Skinner, I'm
talking about Sua Cravens coming out of USC, where he was that versatile chess piece, that kind of dynamic playmaker. As a Bronco, he was terrible.
He was terrible in the NFL, period. It's like, in that versatile chess piece, but there are a lot of other, safeties that you kind of want to see out of him, not necessarily Sua Cravens. Right. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I was just trying to make a joke about Sua Cravens being bad.
That's fine. Watch your Twitter account. He's going to come after you. I promise.
He has me blocked. His name. He's one of those.
Okay.
He has me blocked. But there's something here in the comments that I want to address real quick. It's a pretty good question from F Cholo, saying, "I just read the Malcolm Roach article. Appreciate that. I'm glad you liked it. Well, I hope you liked it. I guess you don't say that you did. How good can this defensive line be? Could John Franklin Myers be our sack leader?" Well, I wouldn't bet on John Franklin Myers being the sack leader simply because of what he's done. He typically has been good for 5 or 6 sacks a season. Mm-hmm. It's not entirely unlikely for a interior defensive lineman to be the team leader in sacks. Justin Madubuike led the Baltimore Ravens. Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, those have been team leaders in sacks on the interior defensive line. It's just what he's done through history just kind of suggests that it probably won't happen. And another thing too with that is that I think that with Baron Browning, Nick Benito, Jonathan Cooper, I think any of those guys, they have the potential to be double-digit sack guys. And maybe John Franklin Myers can, approach 10. I don't think he can break it. Wouldn't, write it out of the realm of possibility. He's definitely a really good addition, and his reliability to get at least 50 pressures a season, as he's done for like all but one season of his career, is absolutely tremendous, and it's going to help everybody else out. I'm just not sure he can be the sack leader for this team.
I'm right there with you on that, and you touched on it. And this is actually something that's going to help out the rest of this not just the interior defensive line, but those edge guys you're talking about: Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito, whether it's Ronnie Perkins, whether it's the kid out of Central Michigan, Thomas Nkum, whoever that may be. The Broncos have quality players with talent on the outside. They've just got to figure out how to win their one-on-ones better. And in the case of Nick Benito, just win a one-on-one period and not just have unblocked sack potential. When you add a guy that, like you said, 50 total pressures a season over the last, 4 years or something like that with Jonathan Franklin Myers, you're collapsing the pocket. You're creating a lot more havoc and allowing opportunities for guys to step up and have that gigantic sack potential. Zach Allen last season was a player that brought enough pressure, but there was no real other guy on the other side to force the issue and really kind of game defensively in terms of the pass rush. Jonathan Franklin Myers is a guy that's going to be a disruptor for sure. He's a quality run defender as well. This guy's going to go in there and he's going to wreak havoc in the B gap, in the A gap as well. He can cross the face of the guard if you need him to, and just be a dynamic player to help out everybody else. That statistic alone, pressures, and Eric, you and I kind of see a little bit eye to eye on this. Pressures are more significant than sacks in terms of your defensive unit overall, because the more that you can create pressure, the more you can disrupt the offense in total. You're not going to get home every single time and get those sack numbers. If you can create constant and consistent pressure, you can be a more disruptive defense overall, at least in my opinion.
I would change the wording of that a little bit. Sacks are far more influential on defenses than pressures are.
Right.
Pressures are a good indicator for sustained success compared to sacks.
Right.
Mostly if you're not like the top guy at the position, or one of the top guys at the position. the sack count fluctuates typically from about 8+ for the, on the sack leader, the leaders for that. Anything lower than 8, you typically see more of a fluctuation over it, but pressures are pretty consistent. And multiple coaches have talked about how much they covet pressures over sack totals because of how much more that can do for it. It creates more opportunities for a turnover. It creates, rattles the quarterback more. I can't remember which quarterback it was. It might have been Tom Brady, but I'm not 100% sure. But they actually talked about it, that they would rather be sacked than just pressured, because it just sits on them more, because they know it's coming and it affects their reading, and it just affects everything else for it, and it creates that opportunity for a mistake, which is why guys like Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin, and a bunch of other greats, Vic Fangio, I mean, not a great head coach, but a great defensive coordinator. It's why guys like that have talked about pressures being more a bigger thing for them to look at and identify and use to articulate success of an individual player over sack totals of it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And no, and I agree with you, and you worded it a lot better than I did. What I was kind of saying, essentially the same thing, just a different way. So thank you for that. But Todd jumps in here, Todd Osendorf, saying, how big will John Franklin Myers' presence help out Cooper and Browning? Significantly. Again, like, you're going to create more consistent interior pass rush pressure and potentially even change offensive line protection schemes, because Franklin Myers is a quality player. He also has the ability to twist and bend around the edge if you need him to. You can run some twists and stunts, specifically with a guy like Nick Bonito, who's a slashing, dynamic, first step explosive playmaker. You run John Franklin Myers on a twist on the outside, Bonito back underneath the inside, create unblocked potential for Nick Bonito. And again, I know I said that we want more one-on-one wins out of Nick Bonito, but if you're allowing this guy to play to his fullest potential, Nick Bonito excels as a slashing, dynamic pass rusher. And I think Jonathan Franklin Myers can really help out with his development moving forward.
And two is like, well, you want to see, when you want to see Nick Bonito, win those one-on-ones, but if you get him unblocked after the quarterback, yeah, you would take that.
By all means, absolutely.
John Franklin Myers can help with that. And also you can utilize him in a similar way that the Jets did. The Jets didn't line him up just as an interior defensive lineman. They lined him up as a 2-point stance as a 7 technique and got pressure that way. They had this great rotation with their pass rushers and defensive line that the Broncos have. They don't have quite the same that the Jets did, but it's somewhat there. And if they can get somebody to really step up in the edge room, Nick Bonito takes that next step. Cooper, Browning's able to stay healthy. Allen, plays more consistently, because last year, the first 4 weeks out of Allen were god awful. And had a lot of people like myself, and if I remember right, Nick Kendall, a lot of us were questioning the signing of Zach Allen, and then he absolutely blew it up. And from week 5 on, he was like number 3 in almost every single statistical or top 3 for almost every single advanced statistical category for an interior defensive lineman when it comes to getting after the quarterback. I mean, it was just a huge flip of him, and you can correlate that to when Van Joseph started doing stuff that he was more comfortable with, which Zach Allen was a little bit more familiar with. So John Franklin Myers, he helps out Bonito, Browning, Cooper by helping out DJ Jones, who can play more inside, by helping out Zach Allen, by keeping quarterbacks from having this avenue, because no longer is Jonathan Harris or DJ Jones or Mike Purcell there not getting any push up the middle and leaving an escape lane for the quarterback. You now have somebody that's helping push and collapse the interior of the pocket, keeping the quarterback from being able to step up, so your edges can work around the edges and get that additional pressure or the sack on the quarterback.
Yeah, and
John Franklin Myers, I mean, I've mentioned it before, he is the biggest addition for this Broncos team.
100% facts.
This offseason.
100% facts. And for what the Broncos got to what they gave up, this is one of the biggest moves that George Paton has ever done, in terms of what he gave up to get a player of this caliber to help out, not only, like you said, DJ Jones, slide him inside, let him play more of that traditional nose tackle role. You get Malcolm Roach in the fold, and Malcolm Roach, quality run defender. You got Zach Allen and Jonathan Franklin Myers on either side of one of those guys. You can create a dynamic interior pass rush and a quality run defense unit with just those 3 or 4 guys. And you don't have to get Matt Henningsen out there. You don't have to get whatever's going to happen with Eyomo Wazirike, Jonathan Harris, like you said, Elijah Garcia, George Jackson, the kid from Air Force. Like you got a quality starter here that's going to be a high level player for you. Like that's a huge boost to this defense, and specifically against the run.
Yeah, and we have a good question here that can take us to the next player. We're kind of skipping over Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders, he's hurt. He'll end up on the PUP list to start the season. He'll probably miss some time. After that, they'll probably see where he's at and potentially bring him back to close out the season.
I got a good question for you on that.
But we'll come back to him.
Yeah, we'll circle back.
With the injury, not a lot there. But Keith Brugman coming in. Is there any truth to the rumor of Riley Moss at safety? No, they seem they have pretty much cemented the fact that he's going to be working outside corner. It's where he's stuck throughout OTAs and mini camp. And that's typically, if you're going to switch positions, that's where you start to do it. You start to get that adjustment going in OTAs and mini camp. And then I can't remember who it is. I'm fairly certain it's Troy Rank who has it, but somebody has a couple comments from both Vance Joseph and Sean Payton that pretty much put to bed anything about Riley Moss being anything but a boundary corner for them this year, and likely the starter opposite Patrick Surtain.
Well, and like you just said here, and Todd comes in here, who steps up to be the number 2 cornerback. You just kind of put it out there. Riley Moss, starting cornerback number 2, opposite of Pat Surtain. To me, you've been vocal on that for a long time. I was always into the, can he play safety? We've gone back and forth too many times. I'm curious your thoughts, though. If you want to see Riley Moss step up and be that quality boundary cornerback, obviously we know the fluidity, the athleticism, the stickiness, the length, the way he plays the football. What do you need to see him step up in specifically to what he brings to the field to be that starting cornerback? Because there's still a lot of question marks in my mind.
I just got to see that it's not too big, not too fast for him, that he took his essentially redshirt year and just grew as a player. His technique's more consistent and improved. He's not, because one thing out of college, when I was watching his college tape, the technique was solid, but he was very much an athlete playing corner. Yep. Well, you can get by with that in college. In the NFL, you can't rely just on the athleticism. Some examples or some exceptions to that rule, but not many. And you got to develop that technique, and you got to be able to stay healthy. Can he stay healthy? Can he show that improvement in the techniques? Can he show that he can play press man?
Yeah.
Can he show that he can be consistent in man coverage instead of the cover 4, cover 6 that they use so much at Iowa?
Yep.
Can he show these aspects of it to really be that? Because from what I understand, he showed the playmaking ability with a couple interceptions in OTAs and minicamp. He showed that he can stick with the guys in there, but OTAs and minicamp, they're a little bit easier. Time for the next step. You got to show it in training camp practices, and then you got to show it in the preseason games. So those preseason games for me, because you have Levi Wallace there, even though they didn't pay him a whole lot to be guaranteed a starting job, he's got that experience. He's a decent enough starter that Riley Moss has to go out and beat him for the job.
Well, and you bring in Levi Wallace to upgrade over Fabian Moreau, and this is not a slander on Fabian Moreau, who I thought played pretty admirably given the situation that he was in last year. He probably some of his best tape, to be honest, playing in a Denver Broncos uniform. But to me, you kind of touched on some things in terms of being able to play in press man, being able to play in just man coverage in general, not focusing solely on opening up his hips and playing in trail coverage like that. Those are big issues here. And Vance Joseph said earlier this offseason that changes defensively happen every single year based on your players first and what they bring, and with the scheme coming second to their skill sets. What kind of changes outside of just, focusing on the press man and stuff like that? What kind of changes does VJ make to the scheme to help accommodate Moss's abilities at boundary cornerback? Because you kind of touched on a little bit. What can VJ do specifically to help him out and flatten this learning curve for him?
Get him developed to where he can play in VJ scheme. I mean, it's tough because you don't want to you don't want to try to fit a square peg in a round hole, that kind of thing. And, sometimes when you're trying to get a guy to fit your scheme, it doesn't work out. But we've seen that Vance Joseph struggles to call things he's not familiar with.
Right.
And that he's very familiar with his defense, obviously. And it's not the ideal fit for Riley Moss, even though they still use zone in it decent amount. So it's just a matter of Riley Moss has to show that he's able to pick it up and go out there and execute. Because you don't want Vance Joseph to go outside of what he's used to and then put other defenders out of it, because how much do you accommodate to Riley Moss? Well, you kind of, hurt what Patrick Surtain can do for you.
Right.
Because Patrick Surtain is very much a man corner who struggles a lot in zone. Struggles in zone. He was like the 43rd best zone corner out of like 163, which is still good, but it's definitely a drop off from what we saw in man.
Right.
So do you do that to accommodate Riley Moss, or do you try to get Riley Moss accommodated to the man so you can play to, one of the better corners, one of the best corners in the NFL? You tend to accommodate the better player.
I don't disagree with you on that. And I think that you're going to see a lot more cover 6, and this is going to sound crazy. I guess let me reevaluate this. I said cover 6, and I kind of still mean that, where you're going to have kind of man coverage on one, cloud coverage on the backside, quarter half, essentially, where you're going to focus with man coverage on Surtain, run quarter half on the other side with Riley Moss playing more off zone, have a safety help over the top if you need him. Like you can get creative here, and I think you're bringing up a very good point here. How much do you have to cater to Riley Moss to have him be successful opposite of Surtain while also accentuating what Surtain does? Very, very interesting conversation here. We got Erick Flynn jumping back in here saying, Erick with a K, Erick with a C, Erick with a CK, Erick. I'm French. Excuse me there. Doesn't matter the spelling. We stand together, he says. Thank you, Erick, man. That's a good comment. That's a quality comment right there. Quality use of the Mile High Huddle YouTube page comment section, man.
And then the chat's kind of slowing down a little bit, so we still have Drew Sanders here, and then depending on how things go, we might be getting out of here a little bit early. So what's your Drew Sanders question you wanted to ask me?
So first, before we get to Drew Sanders, I want to go back to Riley Moss just quickly, but it's not Riley Moss. It's Riley Moss related, but specifically one person on the coaching staff. How much does Jim Leonhard mean to you in terms of what he brings to this coaching staff on the defensive side of the football? Former NFL player, high quality defensive mind, obviously defensive backs coach right now, and he's probably the first in line to be the defensive coordinator if Vance Joseph moves on. How much do you bring in Jim Leonhard and his development with Riley Moss?
I'll wait and see what happens.
Okay.
There's been my thing is there's been so many position coaches who've been super hyped up because of what they've done, and then they just fall flat on their face.
Right.
So Christian Parker, he got hype a lot and he ended up proving it. Well, now it's time for Leonhard he got a lot of hype. Now go out there and show it. What can you do to help make these corners better? Like it just comes down to that. You got to show it.
Well, and Jim Leonhard played, I believe, mostly safety in the NFL, and he was a quality player. He was a punt returner for the Broncos there for a handful of seasons too. So, but again, widely regarded as one of the better defensive minds and one of the better defensive coaches, at least coming into the NFL. Was a great coach for the Wisconsin Badgers for a handful of seasons there as well. So, I'm with you. I think I need to see more of it before I really give a good basis of opinion on it. But I do tend to believe that him working with Riley Moss is going to be a big boost for his development in terms of what he brings in terms of footwork, technique, just being more consistent. That's a big thing for me. To Drew Sanders, though, obviously you've got the torn Achilles in the pre-draft process, not the pre-draft process, but the workout process before the draft. Yeah. Tears an Achilles. It's not a lot to go by in terms of on-field work unless he gets late season playing time. We kind of talked about that. My big question here, and this is more speculation or conjecture, whatever you want to call it, how can the Broncos and Sanders maximize his potential moving forward, given the fact that the big bulk of his work this year is going to be in the rehab room? And if you had to choose the best direction for Sanders moving forward, would you have him focus on being an edge as a pass rusher or focusing on off-ball linebacker?
Yeah, he's a linebacker. He's not an edge rusher. He showed that last year.
Yeah.
He played off the edge to end the season, and my God, it was some of the worst edge tape that I've ever watched. Right. He's not an edge. And one of the things that they can do for that, he's going to be working on rehabbing. Stop with the positionless stuff with him. Yeah. Say, you're a linebacker. You're going to be playing off ball. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to learn. Start focusing on that. Whether he sees the field this year or not, doesn't matter. Start prepping him for that for next year if he doesn't see the field, or prepping him for it if he does see the field this year. Again, that doesn't matter. Just start prepping him for one specific position instead of, oh, what is he going to be? We're not even sure yet.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. The positionless thing, and you've talked about it multiple different times. I brought it up as well. Vance Joseph and the whole positionless player and like versatility with players. He's never really found a way to work with a player like that. Yeah, he's Isaiah Simmons, prime example. Zaven Collins, another player with Vance Joseph in the Arizona Cardinals. They never really found that role that everyone said he's a positionless player. You can find a way to use him. Vance Joseph never really excelled with those players. Hence the reason why Zaven Collins, I believe, is now playing mostly at edge while he played at off-ball linebacker. Isaiah Simmons is playing linebacker for the New York Giants right now, last I knew. With Drew Sanders, focus on one position for him. And I also believe that his best tape that I watched, and I watched him at Alabama, and there's a lot to like with him coming off the edge. I think more blitzer than actual edge defender. His best tape was at Arkansas, playing off the ball, where you could just kind of roam him around a little bit, let him sink his hips, let him drop back into coverage, utilize that length, that athleticism. To me, he needs to just be a linebacker. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked about it, and with the positionless football aspect of it, Vance Joseph actually talked about this, and this is one big thing that I tried to hammer away with about Baron Browning when the Broncos drafted him. Oh, he's an edge, he's off ball, he can do so much for him. If you're going to be a versatile player, you have to have your basis in one area.
Yep.
Maybe right. You can eventually start using Drew Sanders off the edge a little bit, but you got to have him develop in one area, because the more you can do, the less you're learning for one position, which makes it harder for you to have sustained success in the NFL. I mean, it's like that with players at all sorts of positions. You have that one fundamental aspect or position that you do extremely well, and then you go from there. So yeah, maybe now Drew Sanders, you're just a linebacker. Well, eventually we're going to start working you as a situational pass rusher a little bit, or you can be a blitzer for it. Zaven Collins, Vance Joseph was using as a linebacker, and when he finally started, he started to get it down a little bit. Well, he leaves, Gannon sits there and moves him back to edge, and he just had the best year of his career.
Yep.
As a player. Isaiah Simmons, he was a cover guy that they couldn't figure out how to utilize him in coverage because they couldn't, they weren't able to dictate matchups for Isaiah Simmons to best take advantage of him, and offenses were able to take advantage of him. And then even Hassan Reddick.
Yep.
I mean, they bounced him around back and forth between edge and linebacker, and then eventually he ended up having to play edge and had some of the best years of his career playing off the edge.
Yeah, he was tremendous for the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years ago. Absolutely tremendous.
So you got to have that basis in that one area for them to settle down and develop. And we just see it have happened with, a few different players over the years and everything. And Vance Joseph happened to be the defensive coordinator for all of them at some point. And I mean, we could even look at some players during his time in Denver.
As
the head coach of it. But you got to have that one position that you start your bases on, that you can learn the fundamentals of, and then you can build off of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Chase comes in here with a good question, and I'm going to take the reins on this one. Chase says, I know that he was projected higher, but did you guys approve of drafting Sanders in the late second round, third round? But yes, I was a big fan of that, drafting Drew Sanders, because you had edge position concerns, you needed an edge rusher, you had linebacker concerns, and still have had linebacker concerns for the last couple of seasons. I thought that drafting a player with the versatility like that, with a highly athletic skill set and just a raw playmaking athlete to throw out there and just find a role for him, I really did like him, because I know that there was a lot of players, a lot of people, a lot of analysts, draft scouts, whether it was Joe Marino, Trevor Sikkema, Connor Rogers, I can name multiple different people that thought that Drew Sanders was a first round pick, and he falls to the third round, and you go and get him. That was a huge boost to me for this draft class. Actually, I think now that I think about it, you had the B+ for this draft class in terms of my grade because of that. But regardless, where do you think right now? Did you approve of drafting Sanders late in the third round for the Broncos, or is that something that you wish they would have done differently?
Yeah, it was like one of my favorite picks. I had a first round grade on him. I liked him. I'm not surprised he went a little bit lower because, positional value was a question mark with him being a linebacker. And there were so many people that had the question of where is he best at? But he was a really good athlete that you
Yep.
just have to continue to develop as a linebacker because he had some of his best football at Arkansas playing linebacker,
Yep.
but it was only 1 year. So he still needed time to grow and develop. And, the Broncos, they start doing that. And then bam, you're now back to edge, which you did almost over 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Which kind of botched, his development a little bit, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I approved of it. I liked the draft pick. It was one of my favorite ones of the class.
If I remember correctly, so Marvin Mims was one that I actually had an audible yes, let's go kind of thing with you, kind of like with you with Yoma Wakazurike a couple of years ago. But I was like audibly excited about Marvin Mims. Drew Sanders was another one that I was really excited about. Like I do remember that specifically. So yeah, I approve of it. I wish it would work out better. And obviously the injury concerns right now with the torn Achilles, things happen, guys, and you got to just kind of roll with the punches a little bit. I think that I agree with you a little bit, Eric, that you need to focus with him on off-ball linebacker because that best tape that he had was playing at Arkansas. He had, I believe, 2 pick sixes that year. Had a really good season, see-ball, chase ball kind of a linebacker, showing that athleticism. So, no, I'm all about the Sanders pick. I hope that it translates to the next level because this team needs him. They need him to be a high quality player. If you're taking a 3rd round pick, you're talking about a developmental player that turns into a quality starter. Like a 1st round pick, they start day 1. 2nd round pick, you give him a year or so, he's going to be probably a quality starter. 3rd round pick, developmental guy, probably going to end up starting for you eventually down his career. And they need a starting linebacker after this season. You've got Cody Barton, you've got Alex Singleton, Jonas Griffith. Like we know the situation as it is. Drew Sanders has the ability to be a quality starting linebacker at the NFL level with the length and athleticism that he possesses. And while it sucks to not see him in year 2, year 3 is a big, big, big need for him to step up.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, guys, I think we're going to get out of here. Eric, do you have anything else you want to address to run through the chat? I didn't see anything that was there's always quality questions, guys. I'm not trying to like crap on anybody or anything like that, but slow chat tonight. Is there anything else you wanted to grab before we get out of here though?
No, just have a wonderful weekend. We will be back at some point. I know some scheduling stuff might have things change a little bit over the next week, but we'll see what's going on there, and we will see you guys next time. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe.
Yeah. A lot of different scheduling changes. I'm going to be jumping in. I know Eric is going to be jumping in on another show. I think we're jumping in on Tuesday, if I remember correctly. It's going to be interesting. Just pay attention, stay tuned, and make sure you guys are following us on Twitter by finding us at Lance_MHH, for Eric at Erick Trickel, also for Scott running the chat behind the 1s and 2s at Scout Kennedy. Also, while you guys are at it, on Twitter at Mile High Huddle. Great way to follow everything regarding your Denver Broncos and milehighhuddle.com. Film breakdowns, opinion articles, breaking news, analysis, anything you want Denver Broncos related, going to be posted at Mile High Huddle and milehighhuddle.com. MHHmerch.com. Get your guys' swag on. Get you guys a hat like what we've got here, the Dove Valley Deep Divers hat, T-shirts. You've got face masks, a onesie for your baby, something for your dog, guys, gals, anything you want, you can find it there. And guys, if you're not financially able to do so in terms of, stars, super chats, anything like that, hitting the merch tent, everybody should be doing these 3 things. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, does not matter. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video you guys see and article as well. And if you love it, please share it, because without your guys' support, we couldn't do what we do best, which is cover our Denver Broncos. With that, guys, we're going to get out of here. For Erick Trickel, I am Lance Sanderson. For Scott Kennedy, behind the scenes as well. You all stay safe and take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. And as always, go Broncos.